Yeah. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our August Director's Cut, our oil and gas update for North Dakota for the months of June and July. Thank you all for turning out or tuning in, and really appreciate it. So we'll start with some statistics, and then we'll have a little discussion and question and answer. It was a surprise, I think, to myself and all the staff. We saw a 2.5% decline in oil production. And I think we were anticipating a slight increase, and actually anticipating that we would reach that 1.1 million barrel a day mark. So we've been digging into that a little bit. The most likely reason is that we had very few completions in the month of June. We only had 27 completions in the month of June. And although we saw a major increase in the number of completions, I have to look here now at July numbers. Yeah, it jumped to 74 in July and 66 in August. Those came late in the month. And so that production didn't probably hit the oil sales until the last week or so of the month of July. And we were entering August with very, very strong looking numbers. And then we had the situation with Northern Border at the, I believe, Glen, Ullin, and Justin will nod or tell me no.
Zeeland.
I'm sorry. Oh, it's Zeeland.
Zeeland.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
So it's a compressor station at Zeeland, North Dakota. We don't often talk about the thriving metropolis of Zeeland, North Dakota. But so that put major restrictions on our gas export capacity. And then we also had the Robinson Lake turnaround in August. So we were just starting to reap the benefits of the major uptick in completions in July. And then we ran into those two things. So our target, 1.1 million, 1.2 million barrels a day is pushed back with a 2.5% decline in oil production. Now, interestingly enough, natural gas production actually increased. So even though oil production dropped 2.5%, natural gas was up 1.3%. So very strong return to that increasing gas oil ratio trend that we've been watching as the Bakken develops, and particularly in the core area. So we didn't have record production, but the great news is we had record gas capture. For the first time in North Dakota history, we captured and put to market more than 3 billion cubic feet a day. So we've produced more than 3 billion before, but we have never captured and marketed more than 3 billion. So that's great news. And so even in the face of some major headwinds with gas transmission capacity and gas processing capacity, and it seemed to have impacted central Williams County and northern McKenzie County, and then northern Dunn County the most. So again, our gas midstream company that is most closely tied to Northern Border was impacted the most. But having said all that, they maintained above 94% gas capture, even with all of that going on. And, you know, so that likely was due to reducing oil production and being very cautious with that. I think a little bit of exciting, good news, light at the end of the tunnel, if you want to put it that way. If you look at August drilling permits, that is the first time we have permitted over 100 wells since October of 2019. So that is a very long run, almost 3 years. And so that's encouraging. That would indicate that even though we didn't reach that 1.1 million barrel a day mark that we have been talking about, it is likely coming. And even the march towards 1.2 with that kind of permitting activity. So that's exciting to see us get over 100 permits, and that happened in the month of August. Happy to see the duct well count, the waiting on completion, drop a little bit more. We'd like to see that faster, but it is dropping. And very happy to see the inactive well count drop by almost 100 wells. So when we look at a couple of other items, moving away from the statistics, we had talked last month about OPEC extending their run of production increases by a couple of months. Not a lot, about 100,000 barrels a day. They met this week and canceled that. So in light of the weak oil markets and the demand destruction that has taken place with the economies of Europe and the US, OPEC decided that putting an additional 100,000 barrels a day on the market in August and again in September was a very bad idea. And so they've canceled those increases. Rig count has really pretty much stalled out in the mid-40s. And what we continue to hear, the steady drumbeat, that it's a skilled workforce problem, that we just are unable to attract the skilled labor that we need in order to deploy more drilling rigs and more frac crews. Now, the Permian Basin is seeing some success in that area, not rapid increases, but if you look at New Mexico's rig count, I think it went up by 5, and ours actually went down slightly. I think we dropped. We gained a rig in August, from July to August, and then lost that again today. Whereas New Mexico saw about a 5 rig increase. So the Permian Basin is seeing some success in adding workforce and adding rigs and frac crews, and the Williston Basin is not. So we are looking at what do we do? How do we work with commerce or job service to try to promote the opportunities that we have here in North Dakota? And I think you heard some stuff earlier this week. Governor Burgum is very focused on this, and one of the areas is childcare that he's trying to work on to improve the situation. So I should mention the potential railroad worker strike. It looks like tentatively that a deal has been reached to avoid that or avert that. Justin can talk a little bit more about volumes, but if I read the numbers correctly, it's about 100,000 barrels a day that is dependent upon rail to move out of the state of North Dakota. Now, there's capacity for that to be exported some other way, but there is no capacity for that to reach the West Coast any other way. And that's where I think 3 out of every 4 of those barrels needs to get to the West Coast to supply the northwestern Washington state refineries. So good news from that standpoint. It looks like we're not going to see a situation with the railroad workers striking. Natural gas prices are just way up. Most of the people that I talk to can't remember the last time we had $8 and $9 gas in August. That isn't a great sign for consumers going into the winter, but it does mean that there is plenty of cash flow coming from natural gas processing, natural gas transmission, natural gas liquids to fund expansions of infrastructure. So we should see our operators and midstream people stay ahead of that increasing gas oil ratio with infrastructure investments to maintain our gas capture. Nationwide, natural gas storage is 12% below the 5-year average. That's not a critical level, but it also indicates some pretty strong prices through the winter and into next year. On the federal front, just one item I want to talk about, and this was a real surprise to the state of North Dakota. Last week on Tuesday, I believe it was, the day after Labor Day, the BLM and a group of NGOs announced that they filed a proposed settlement. The BLM had been sued over the NEPA analysis that they had done on the 2019 and 2020 lease sales. And as an agreement in the settlement, they agreed to not permit the wells for those leases. So we have done an analysis of the impact of that out of those sales, and it's a combined Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming lawsuit and settlement. So it's 113 leases. 55 of those, almost half, are in North Dakota. And it's about 9,600 acres that are affected. Those acres impact, in 5 cases, state leases that will not see development as a result, or delayed development, and probably 5 times as much private mineral acres that will not see development or delayed development. So we've evaluated the impact to state revenues, and it's about $8 million a month. So every month that those permits are delayed, the state of North Dakota loses through production tax, extraction tax, sales tax, income tax on those private minerals, and the share of federal royalties and trust land royalties. And this is at $50 oil. So the current impact is significantly higher than 8 million, but at a minimum, $8 million a month of negative impact for every month of delay as a result of that settlement. The whole lawsuit, the settlement, is about the fact that the NEPA analysis on those leases did not include the social cost of carbon emissions, which is probably the most undefined terms I can think of. And so it's going to be really problematic. I can't envision a scenario where that is quickly remedied. And so as the clock ticks away, the citizens of North Dakota are losing $8 million a month in revenue from the 130 wells whose permitting and drilling is delayed. So that's the stats for the month of July. Not awesome news, a little surprised that we saw an oil production decline, but awesome news with regards to permitting, gas production, and gas capture. So take some questions. I think, let me see. There was a question about migration of crude oil transportation, moving from one pipeline to another based on prices, or moving from rail to pipeline. Justin's really the guy to answer that, if there's any indication in the data that that's going on.
So do we think that the oil production dropped a little bit because operators had to shut back in wells because of lack of gas transportation?
Yeah, the question was, do we think the drop in oil production was because of operators shutting back wells? And actually, it looks like it's because of the very, very weak completion numbers from the month of June. So as we got into the last week of July, we started to see a major surge in production. And I should have clarified, Dave, what we saw in terms of gas transportation problems is going to really come home to roost in August. So it was the weak June completion numbers that made the first half, maybe the first 3 weeks of July, very weak. We had a really strong last week of July, first week of August, and then we ran into the gas problems. So looking at the numbers, it'll be very surprising if we top that 1.1 million in August, but check back with us next month.
As a follow-up, I apologize, I'm not coming up with my memory about what happened at Zeeland.
I'll talk about that.
Okay, so we'll defer that to Justin. He can give you some details, but if I understand correctly, there's a compressor station there, and there were some mechanical issues.
Anything else?
That's all I have.
All right,
Okay.
thank you very much again, everyone, for tuning in.
Check that. I won't say anything, but if you want. Yeah, I don't know. Get back to my computer. Good afternoon. Are you ready?
Yep,
On your
go ahead,
side?
yep.
Good afternoon, everyone. Justin Kringstad, Director of the North Dakota Pipeline Authority. This Bethany, so you can see where I'm at here. So just taking a peek around the region. We do have some updated numbers from Montana as well as South Dakota holding steady. Montana does have 2 active drilling rigs now, 0 active rigs in South Dakota. So we'll keep an eye on that. Again, the reason we keep such close track on our neighbors is that we share the same transportation network, and what's happening in those plays influences what's happening in the dynamics here on the North Dakota side. So we'll keep everyone abreast of what's happening on that front. If we look at slide 3, those month-to-month changes, Lynn talked about the oil and gas, but one other record that was set in the month of July was a new gas oil ratio of 2.9, and so we saw 2 back-to-back very strong months in growth. Again, this is something we've been more than a decade looking at and trying to understand. So it shouldn't be a surprise, and it's really not. But again, it's just confirming some of the challenges that we know are coming as it relates to gas capture and making sure that all the systems are in place to adequately handle all the streams of production that's coming out of the wells in western North Dakota. So taking a look at slide 4, I know there was a question that I'll try and answer through my discussion here about some of the transportation logistics. On slide 5, we can start to see some of those key parameters. Again, that blue dotted line, I don't always highlight it, but when we look back at that July timeframe, we did see a pretty strong jump in that Brent WTI spread. So again, that's that global oil price on the Brent side, the domestic Cushing, Oklahoma price with the WTI there. Historically, if we see that number north of say $5-6, if it's sustained for any period of time, typically we'll see barrels start getting attracted to the rail side. And I say that though with some of our older parameters surrounding what was going on nationwide on pricing. So if we look at slide 6, over the last number of months, just extremely strong pricing in the Midwest for crude oil, and we're seeing that throughout the Midwest, the Great Lakes, working its way back to Clearbrook and even back into the North Dakota side of the play. You can see again here what refiners were paying in June. Stronger pricing in the Midwest than even at the Gulf Coast, which is something that we do not see very often. Still PAD 1, PAD 5 and the East and West Coast having the highest priced markets, but second to those being the Midwest. And so there were some constraints and some issues with some of the Canadian assets. But the other thing that's taking place is we're seeing a lot of products, your gasoline, diesel fuels, as global disruptions are taking place, particularly in PAD 1, we're seeing a strong pull for those refined products into the East Coast as waterborne shipments become more challenging, and that's supporting those refining complexes in the Midwest. And so that is working out to be a very strong situation here for us up in North Dakota. So pipeline systems, the question was asked about pricing dynamics and what's happening. I can't necessarily speak to individual pipelines, but we are seeing barrels that if they have an opportunity to get onto a system that's going to move them to the Midwest or stay in the Midwest. As you know, even Dakota Access has the Patoka, Illinois hub. The barrels have an opportunity to get off at that point. And so with strong Midwest pricing, I don't have any details of what that breakdown is. But I would suspect there is at least a portion of those barrels getting off at that Patoka hub and staying in the Midwest rather than working its way down down to the Gulf. On the rail movements, again, a lot of discussion in recent days about where North Dakota's at. You know, clearly this is the first product that most folks think about. Crude oil right around that 80 to 90,000 barrels per day in the month of June, certainly down from the highs of years past. But when you think about rail's importance to the oil and gas industry in North Dakota, crude oil is one component of that. We have a number of natural gas liquids, either in Y-grade format or in pure product format. All of your tubulars, your sand, the industry as a whole is incredibly reliant from all different facets as it comes to rail transportation, both outbound and inbound shipments. And then you think about, again, some of those larger macro scale issues where, again, these coastal PAD 1, PAD 5, these coastal refining centers that rely on domestic deliveries by rail car, where, again, in North Dakota, we may have some flexibility to move things out in other means, but they're limited on their flexibility of how they're going to be supplied for their energy needs. So, again, a lot of different components to discuss on that front. And just a quick follow-up on that, we're still seeing PAD 5 West Coast, now over 80% of those deliveries estimated to be going out in that direction, with the remainder going to that PAD 1 East Coast complex. And then, as I mentioned, this is just a snapshot then of this morning when I grabbed some prices in Clearbrook, north of $4.50, which again is something that we used to see a negative sign in front of that number. And so this is, again, extremely strong price environment that, again, I don't recall anything to this level in my knowledge. And then looking around the rest of the U.S., Gulf Coast, $2.50, and then that Brent WTI spread today just over $5. So we'll keep an eye on that and those dynamics of crude by rail versus pipeline. We're back down to zero exports into Canada out of North Dakota. The inbound movements through the ports has steadied around that, we'll call it 60 to 70,000 barrels per day. So no major dynamic shifts on that front. And another steady month on gas capture. So this is 4 straight months of 94% capture. The breakdown of why those molecules are being flared has been the same now for 4 straight months. So we're seeing a consistency from the industry to stay on top of this and exceed those NDIC targets. Again, there's still a lot of work to be done. Even that 6%, there's an appetite to reduce that even further. So it's going to be exciting to watch the developments continue to address that challenge. We'll bump forward to slide 13. The only alarming slide. No, perfect. Thank you. The only alarming thing that popped out from the July numbers was we saw more producing gas, more wells producing gas than new wells selling gas in the month of July. So I'm hopeful that this is just a one-off swing in the numbers, but if we start to see back-to-back months of this, that starts to become more concerning, that things are not catching up as necessary out in the field, and we'll start to see, again, either flaring numbers come up, but even probably more likely production curtailed from sites where either those wells won't come online or they'll cut back production in order to manage the gas volumes. The EIA has just very slightly dropped their September price outlook for the next year and a half. And so they're still up in the upper 80s towards the tail end of 2023. So they are expecting, again, very strong, robust prices relative to what we've been accustomed to over the last 5 or so years. So again, a price that when we look forward, would it drive activity in North Dakota? And then I think that answer is going to continue to be yes. Those are definitely strong outlooks, and a situation where North Dakota's industry would still be active and still see attractive economics. As Lynn alluded to, again, I typically, when I'm pointing to this graphic, take a look at gas processing volumes, but in green, again, we did set a record for gas capture. So again, the GOR record, the gas capture record, so all positive things on that front related to natural gas. And then I will comment quickly. I know last month I was talking about the natural gas grant program. The NDIC did extend the west to east component of that for a new deadline of December 15th. So again, the conversations are happening behind the scenes about who those players who those partners might be to get things done both on the supply and as well as the demand side. So stay tuned. It's something that's not stagnant. There's a lot of things happening to try and work some type of solution for both Western and Eastern North Dakota. And then the northern border pipeline market shares, not much shift, but I do want to focus very quickly. I'm going to slide forward just to slide 19 because there was some discussion surrounding this and the events both in August, and then I'm going to talk about another event that took place here in September. So in August, we saw the Zeeland compressor. That was an unexpected force majeure event, meaning that it was not a planned. They did have compressor equipment malfunction at the Zeeland compressor station. So if you're not familiar with gas pipelines, along the route, they have these compressor stations. These compressor stations increase the pressure, and that forces those gas molecules down the pipeline systems. And so this was just one of the many compressor stations along the route. While that was being out of service and being corrected, that did reduce the overall capacity on northern border. What was unique about this situation was its unplanned status. Industry had no time up to that day to plan or make alternative arrangements for their activity. And so we saw a real immediate shift from producers, North Dakota, Canadian as well. The capacity was reduced. Throughput volumes working its way all the way back to the wellhead, where we saw curtailments of production, gas volumes through plants, all those things very quickly rippling back through the industry. Again, having this discussion here now in September 2022, what's unique is that, again, 5 years ago, we would have likely seen a real ramp up in natural gas flaring. Today's environment, we saw producers, rather than ramp up flaring, curtail, choke back production. And we're going to see that reflected in those August numbers when we see that next month. But it was not insignificant for that period of time. The good news was that they were able to get that addressed in 5 days, August 14th, August 19th. Original projections were that it would extend through August 25th. So they did get that maintenance or that compressor back online faster than expected. And then here in September, this week, the Glen compressor station, this was a planned maintenance event. So this was on everyone's radars and schedules. And so this is going to be less disruptive, still disruptive at some capacity, but that is a normal course of business when you operate equipment. You do have to go through routine maintenance. And so what the industry does during a period like this is, again, there's going to be some production impacts, but at the same time, other pipelines, plants, other field infrastructure, they'll use some of these times as opportunities to couple other maintenance and co-schedule some of those things so that it's less disruptive over the long term. And so we saw a number of other maintenance things happening here concurrently. And then again, here as of actually 9 a.m. this morning, they got this back online. And as of today, they're back at full capacity for the remainder of today. So with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions. If I missed some of the earlier questions, I apologize. Just let Bethany know, and I'll be glad to re-answer it. So
it was a 5-day unplanned.
Correct.
And the one that was planned was how long?
It was September 13th, so basically a little over 2 days.
Oh,
yeah.
2 days. So the head, because of the gas oil ratio, you're saying we still have a challenge ahead in terms of flaring.
Correct. And so there's a number of different scenarios, and when you play it out as far as what North Dakota's oil production, I do have my oil production forecast, but at the same time, I'm going to bounce. I know for radio it's bad to point to graphics, but just taking a peek at slide 15. We are expecting growth in oil production long term in North Dakota. So going from today's volumes up to north of 1.1, north of 1.2, and potentially north of 1.3 million, depending upon the circumstances. At that point, we're going to continue to see gas volumes grow even faster in North Dakota. And so we need to have all aspects of gas capture in place, from the wellhead all the way through to the deliveries to consumers around the U.S.
Is this ratio unique to the Bakken? It's strong Well, your gas oil ratio.
Yep, so the question was about the GOR, is it unique to the Bakken? Not necessarily unique, it's a known reservoir, physics and chemistry situation. What's unique though is every oil field and every portion of the oil field is gonna have its own characteristics. So there's nothing, it's not a rubber stamp from the Bakken to the Permian and these other places. The Bakken is unique, it's gonna have its own profiles and its own challenges associated with it.
Do you know what it is in the Permian?
I don't off the top of my head. The numbers are not as easy to get a hold of in Texas.
I don't have anything online. Did you have anything else?
Nope.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Yep,
joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.